In the chaos of World War II, survival was often a question of fate, resilience, and the last words shared between loved ones. From final letters written on the battlefield to whispered goodbyes at train stations, these moments reveal the human spirit's strength in the face of despair. This is not just a history of war, it's the untold stories of love, sacrifice, and the enduring power of hope.
In the midst of World War II, soldiers and civilians alike faced the grim reality of saying goodbye, often not knowing if it would be their last. Farewells were written in ink, spoken in whispers, or exchanged in hurried embraces, carrying the weight of unspoken fears. These goodbyes became snapshots of humanity in a time of unimaginable chaos, each one a testament to love, resilience, and sacrifice. In December 1944, during the brutal Battle of the Bulge, 24-year-old Private First Class Joseph Harrington wrote what would become his final letter. "Dearest Mary, the cold here is nothing like home in Tennessee, but I keep thinking about the warmth of your smile. If I don't make it, promise me you'll live your life fully. That's what will keep me alive, no matter where I am." Joseph never returned, but his words lived on, treasured by his family for generations. In war-torn France, resistance fighter Pierre Leclerc survived an ambush that killed his entire unit. Wounded and alone, he crawled through enemy lines, carrying a blood-stained notebook containing their plans. "I owed it to them to finish what we started," he said. The Pacific Theater bore its own tales of heartbreak. During the Battle of Iwo Jima in 1945, Corporal Takeshi Yoshida scribbled a farewell on a scrap of paper in the hours before a final assault. "Mother, forgive me for not being able to return. I have done my duty for my country, but my heart is with you always." His body was discovered by American forces, but his letter was delivered to his family in Japan, a rare gesture of compassion amid the horrors of war. Back home, families awaited news with dread and hope. For some, letters arrived long after the ultimate sacrifice had been made. In the small town of Fort Dodge, Iowa, Martha Anderson received her son's last words 6 months after his death in Normandy. "Mom, I think about you every day. Remember, everything I do is for you and Dad." She kept the letter folded in her pocket for the rest of her life. Not all goodbyes were written. During the evacuation of Dunkirk in 1940, Lieutenant Henry Watson had only moments to embrace his fiancée on the shore before boarding a ship. "I'll be back for our wedding," he promised, though his sinking ship would later claim his life. His fiancée wore her wedding dress on the day his death was confirmed, a haunting symbol of love interrupted by war. On the home front, children also faced wrenching separations. Operation Pied Piper, Britain's mass evacuation of children during the Blitz, saw mothers and fathers tearfully placing their young ones on trains to the countryside. "Be good, darling. "Remember we love you," was often the last thing children heard before the train whistle drowned out their parents' voices. For many, the reunions they dreamed of would never come. Some goodbyes carried extraordinary bravery. In 1943, Sophie Scholl, a member of the German anti-Nazi group White Rose, wrote her final message before her execution: "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there is hardly anyone willing to give themselves up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine, sunny day, and I have to go. What does my death matter if, through us, thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" Prisoners of war often smuggled letters through improbable channels. In Stalag Luft III, a German POW camp, Allied Airman James Daniels hid a note in a care package destined for his family: "Tell the boys to keep laughing, and tell Mary I'll be home to dance with her." He escaped the camp months later, fulfilling his promise to return home. As the war drew to a close, final goodbyes became bitter reminders of lives forever changed. In Hiroshima, survivor Akiko Takahashi recalled her last moments with her brother before the atomic bomb struck. "He handed me his watch, saying, 'This is for you, Akiko, keep it safe.' I never saw him again." Goodbyes were not limited to soldiers or civilians. During the Holocaust, countless Jewish families were separated at train stations under Nazi orders. At Auschwitz, 12-year-old Miriam Katz clung to her mother's hand until they were forced apart. "Don't look back," her mother whispered. Miriam survived, but the memory of that moment haunted her for the rest of her life. For those who endured, survival was often intertwined with the memory of those they had lost. In 1942, at the Battle of Stalingrad, Russian soldier Ivan Pavlov survived intense shelling, only to discover the body of his best friend clutching a family photograph. Ivan vowed to carry the photo back to his friend's family in Moscow, a promise he fulfilled 2 years later, walking hundreds of miles to do so. Survivors of concentration camps carried stories of resilience. In 1945, when Auschwitz was liberated, 16-year-old Eliezer Weiss clutched a tattered piece of paper bearing his father's last words: "Stay alive, my son. That is the greatest revenge." Weiss would later recount that message as the driving force behind his survival. In the Pacific, survival often came at a staggering cost. Marine John Sullivan, one of the few survivors of the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, clung to debris in shark-infested waters for 5 days. "I kept thinking about Mom and Dad waiting on the porch," he said years later. "That thought kept me afloat." For civilians, survival meant enduring unimaginable losses. In Warsaw, Poland, 10-year-old Zofia Nowak survived the uprising that decimated her city. Her parents were killed, but she found refuge with the resistance. "I was told to carry messages because the Germans wouldn't suspect a child," she later recalled. "That's how I stayed alive." Even in survival, guilt lingered. Holocaust survivor Eva Kor, who endured medical experiments at Auschwitz, struggled with the memory of her twin sister, who did not survive. "I lived for both of us," Eva said decades later. "But the weight of her absence never left me." As the war ended, survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives. For many, the goodbyes they had said became the foundation of their resilience. In 1946, British evacuee Margaret Wilson, who had not seen her family in 6 years, returned home to a mother she barely recognized. "We cried for hours," she recalled. "War changes everything, even the people you love." Survivors carried these goodbyes as part of their legacy. Some shared their stories to ensure the past was never forgotten, while others kept their memories private, etched deeply into their hearts. The last goodbyes of World War II remain a testament to the enduring power of love, sacrifice, and the will to survive.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty powerful today. Goodbyes during World War II.
Oh, absolutely. And we're really focusing on those personal stories.
Exactly. Not so much the battles and strategies, but kind of more those human moments.
Yeah.
We've got letters, we've got firsthand accounts,
Right.
historical records, but just these glimpses into these really intense personal moments.
And I think what's fascinating is just how frequent these goodbyes were.
Yeah.
They were woven into daily life,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
both for soldiers and civilians.
Absolutely. It wasn't just soldiers shipping out, right?
Right, yeah.
Families were being separated through evacuation.
Of course, yeah.
You had prisoners clinging to hope in camps.
Right.
I mean, even in the face of just unimaginable horrors, people found ways to say goodbye. And one of the things that really struck me is just the variety, you know?
Right, yeah.
Some of them are very grand, symbolic gestures, and others are just quiet, almost invisible moments.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. You can sort of think about them as symbolic goodbyes versus everyday goodbyes.
Oh, interesting.
So take, for example, Lieutenant Henry Watson at Dunkirk.
Okay.
In all that chaos of the evacuation, he makes a promise to his fiancée that he's going to come back for their wedding.
Wow.
Tragically, he doesn't.
Right.
But she wears her wedding dress on the day his death is confirmed.
Oh, wow.
That just transforms this personal promise
Yeah.
into this powerful symbol of love interrupted by war.
Yeah, it's almost like she's defying the finality of the goodbye, right?
Right.
Keeping his memory alive through this symbolic gesture. It just makes me wonder, did these symbolic goodbyes, did they offer a way for people to kind of cope with the overwhelming grief and loss of war?
I think that's possible.
Yeah.
Creating rituals and symbols can be a really powerful way to process trauma and find meaning in the face of just unimaginable things.
Yeah.
And we see that in other forms as well.
Oops.
Remember Private First Class Joseph Harrington's letter from the Battle of the Bulge?
Okay, yeah.
He urges his sweetheart, Mary, to live life to the fullest if he doesn't return.
That's the one about her dancing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Even in the face of death, he's focusing on her happiness.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know, it just makes you realize the depth of love and sacrifice that's present in these wartime goodbyes.
It does. And it also reveals, I think, a fascinating sort of psychological coping mechanism.
Yeah.
By focusing on Mary's future, he finds a way to make meaning out of his own potential sacrifice. It's a testament to that resilience of the human spirit, finding hope even in the darkest of moments.
Yeah. And it wasn't just romantic love.
Right.
Corporal Takeshi Yoshida's farewell letter to his mother from Iwo Jima, I mean, it echoes that same sentiment.
Right.
He asks for her forgiveness, knowing that he may not return, but he assures her that his heart remains with her always.
It's striking how these letters become almost sacred objects.
Yeah.
They carry not only the weight of final words, but they also serve as these tangible links to those left behind. And families treasure them, passing them down for generations.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you think about the power of the written word, especially during wartime.
Right.
I mean, in a world disrupted by conflict, letters become these lifelines.
Yeah.
Carrying love, hope, and even a sense of normalcy across continents.
And for those separated by just circumstances beyond their control,
Yeah.
these letters were often all they had.
Yeah.
Think about the millions of children evacuated from British cities during Operation Pied Piper.
Right.
Imagine being a parent, putting your child on a train, not knowing when or if you'd see them again.
Yeah, the source material mentioned parents just being able to get out a hurried, be good, darling, remember we love you, before the train pulled away.
Right.
Oh, man. It must have been agonizing for both parents and children.
Absolutely. Studies on childhood development show just how crucial a sense of security and stability is for young minds.
Yeah.
The sudden separation from parents, the uncertainty of their situation, the constant fear of air raids, all of this contributed to a collective trauma experienced by an entire generation.
It's a reminder that war's impact goes far beyond the battlefields.
Yeah.
It disrupts families, communities, and leaves these lasting psychological scars.
It does.
But in the midst of all of this, we also see incredible acts of resilience and even defiance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take Sophie Skoll, for instance. She was part of the White Rose resistance group in Nazi Germany. Even facing certain death, she never wavered in her commitment to her cause.
And her final message before her execution is so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
How can we expect righteousness to prevail, she writes, when there is hardly anyone willing to give themselves up individually to a righteous cause? It's almost as if she's transforming her goodbye into a call to action.
It is. It's remarkable. Yeah, it's a remarkable transformation. Her goodbye becomes an act of defiance. It's a testament to the power of individual courage to spark change, even in the darkest of times. And it's not just grand gestures of defiance. Even in the confines of a POW camp, we see these glimmers of hope and resilience shining through.
You're thinking about James Daniels, the Allied airman held captive in Stalag Luft III.
Exactly. Imagine the audacity, smuggling a note out in a care package, telling his family to keep laughing and promising his sweetheart to dance upon his return. And incredibly, he escapes months later and fulfills that promise. It underscores the power of hope, even in seemingly hopeless situations.
It makes you wonder, how did people hold on to hope in those circumstances? Was it just sheer willpower, or were there other factors at play?
I think it was a combination of factors. For some, it was faith, a belief in a higher power that sustained them. For others, it was the love of family and friends, the thought of returning home that kept them going. And sometimes it was the simple act of defiance, of refusing to give in to despair that fueled their hope.
Like clinging to a small act of normalcy, even in the midst of chaos. Reminds me of the story of Ivan Pavlov, the Russian soldier at Stalingrad. He survives intense shelling, only to discover his best friend's body clutching a family photograph.
And he makes an incredible promise to return that photo to his friend's family in Moscow, walking hundreds of miles after the war to fulfill that vow.
It speaks to the depth of their bond and the profound sense of duty he felt to honor his friend's memory. It's a powerful example of how these goodbyes could transform into acts of remembrance and responsibility.
It also highlights the importance of keeping the memory of those lost alive, ensuring their sacrifice wasn't in vain. And it wasn't just about fulfilling promises made to those gone. We also see examples of people finding strength in the words of loved ones, even if they were no longer there.
You're thinking about Eliezer Weiss, the Holocaust survivor who clung to his father's final words, "Stay alive, my son. That is the greatest revenge."
Precisely. In a way, his father's words become a lifeline, pulling him through the darkness of Auschwitz and giving him a reason to keep going. This goodbye transforms into a source of strength, a guiding principle for survival.
It's remarkable how the human mind can latch onto these images of love and hope, even in the most desperate situations. John Sullivan, the sailor who survived the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, credits the thought of his parents waiting for him on the porch with keeping him afloat amidst shark-infested waters.
These stories speak to the primal need for connection, for something beyond ourselves to give us strength. For many survivors, these goodbyes, whether spoken or unspoken, became an integral part of their identity, shaping how they viewed the world, their relationships, and how they navigated life after war.
But as we've seen, the aftermath of war wasn't always a straightforward narrative of resilience and triumph. There's also the heavy weight of survivor's guilt, the lingering question of, why me?
Yes, that's an important point. Eva Kor's story is a poignant example. She survives the horrors of Auschwitz, including medical experiments. But her twin sister doesn't. She talks about living for both of them, but also carrying the burden of her sister's absence.
It's a stark reminder that even in survival, there's a cost, an emotional toll that can linger for decades. And it makes these wartime goodbyes even more complex. They're not just about saying farewell, but about grappling with loss, with trauma, with the fundamental questions of life and death.
And there's also the daunting task of rebuilding. Think about Margaret Wilson, the British evacuee who returns home after 6 years, to find her mother practically a stranger.
It highlights how war can irrevocably alter relationships and reshape the fabric of family life. These goodbyes become a catalyst for change, forcing individuals and families to adapt to a new reality.
And these changes weren't just limited to individuals and families. The very fabric of society was transformed by the experience of war and the countless goodbyes that shaped it. The roles of women, the concept of community, even the relationship between nations, all of these were profoundly affected by the shared experience of saying goodbye.
So as we delve deeper into this concept of goodbyes, it becomes clear that they weren't just individual moments of farewell. They represented a collective experience, a shared narrative that shaped an entire generation.
And as we've seen, these goodbyes took many forms. Heartfelt letters, rushed embraces on train platforms, whispered words in the face of unimaginable horrors, unspoken promises etched in memory. Each one unique, yet all connected by this profound sense of human connection amidst adversity. Yeah, and that's what makes these stories so enduring. They remind us that even in the darkest of times, even when facing the unknown, the human spirit finds ways to love, to hope, to connect, to persevere. And those acts of resilience, those threads of humanity, they continue to resonate long after the last goodbye has been said.
It's like those goodbyes become woven into the tapestry of history, right? Shaping not only the lives of those directly involved, but also influencing the course of nations and future generations. And it's amazing how these personal stories, these intimate glimpses into the lives of individuals, can give us such a profound understanding of war's broader impact. It reminds us that history isn't just about dates and battles.
It's about people, their experiences, emotions, and connections. And one aspect that often gets overlooked is the role of objects in preserving these memories. Whether it's a letter tucked away in a drawer, a photograph clutched in a dying hand, or a watch passed down through generations, these tangible items become repositories of memory, connecting the past to the present in a visceral way.
You're right. Like that story we talked about earlier about Akiko Takahashi in Hiroshima, who receives her brother's watch just before the atomic bomb drops. A simple act, but imbued with so much unspoken love and foreboding. She never sees him again. But that watch becomes a tangible symbol of their connection, a reminder of his love even in his absence.
Exactly. And it highlights another key aspect of these goodbyes, the enduring power of objects to transcend time and connect us to those who came before us. By preserving them, by sharing their stories, we keep those memories alive. We honor the sacrifices made, and we ensure that the lessons of the past are not forgotten.
It's like those objects become vessels of emotion, carrying the weight of the goodbyes they represent. Their presence evokes a sense of longing, of loss, but also of love and enduring connection.
And that brings us to a crucial point. These goodbyes, these stories of love and loss of resilience and sacrifice, they're not just relics of the past. They hold valuable lessons for us today. They remind us of the importance of human connection, the power of hope, and the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Perhaps by understanding the goodbyes of the past, we can better navigate the uncertainties and complexities of our present.
So, as we conclude this deep dive into the goodbyes of World War II, what stands out to you? What do you think are the most important takeaways for us today?
For me, it's the realization that goodbyes, while often painful, can also be transformative. They can push us to cherish the present moment, to express our love more freely, and to live our lives with greater intention and purpose. They can remind us of what truly matters and inspire us to build a world where such heart-wrenching farewells become less frequent, less necessary.
It's a powerful thought, and one that I hope our listeners will carry with them. These stories remind us that even in the midst of global conflict and unimaginable hardship, the human spirit finds ways to love, to hope, to connect, to persevere. And ultimately, isn't that what makes us human?
Indeed. And that's a legacy worth preserving, a lesson worth learning from.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the goodbyes of World War II. May these stories of resilience, courage, and love inspire us to embrace the present, cherish our connections, and strive for a future where such poignant farewells become echoes of a bygone era.